Quick introduction about me. My name is Logan. I'm the managing editor here with Scholarships Canada, and I have done for a couple of years now. We're going to talk today about finding and applying for scholarships. Not only how do you track them down, but how do you make it easy on yourself to to find them. So excuse me for that, and let's get started. Okay, yes, as I mentioned, Logan is me, managing editor. Out of high school, I first went to college and earned an advanced technical diploma from Niagara College in film, radio, TV. And that was great, very practical, very hands-on, very small groups, took about 3 years. And worked in film after that for a few years, but I wanted to go to university. I wanted that experience, and I wanted to make my living reading and writing. So I went back to school after some time overseas volunteering and earned an honors BA, which takes about 4 years in linguistics, writing, and rhetoric from U of T. So I know a thing or two, unfortunately, about tuition fees and student loans and applying for scholarships. That was all in advance of my work here, of course. So let's continue. Just pulled some fresh stats here. They're still a couple of years old, 2016 census. Unfortunately, we don't have numbers crunched from the more recent one. Alas, this will do. The value of a post-secondary education. It's rather apparent if you follow these cells left to right that the more education you pursue, the more money you are likely to make. So from high school diploma, making 24K, up to a master's, making 60 plus. And then depending on your field, you can get up into 80, 90, 100 plus in some cases. So often it is worthwhile to pursue higher ed. The challenge, of course, is paying for it. But as it says here, you might earn $1 million more over the course of your lifetime, your working career with a BA or equivalent, even more with a master's. Of course, you're going to proportionally spend more money as well, unless you're super careful. So it's more than just money, though. We talk a little bit about the value of a degree in shaping a well-rounded person, the sort of civic mindedness, community spirit kind of engaged student. And scholarship programs do this as well. We'll talk about how as we go, but the idea being that you're sort of a healthier, more engaged, environmentally sound kind of person once you've been through a few years of higher ed. Now, there is a question of, does higher ed attract people who are naturally more civically minded? That's philosophical debate for another time. So let's dive into the real meat of the story here. But first, we got to define a few things, some really basic terms. So a scholarship, it is used generically as a sort of catch-all, meaning money for school, right? I got a scholarship, I got some money to pay for school. More specifically, it's generally related to achievements, grades being first and foremost, or in the context of the US especially, like sports scholarships, right? I'm getting a full ride baseball scholarship because I'm going to pitch for the whomever. That's not such common in Canada, but certainly I got a 95 on my high school average, and so my university is giving me a scholarship. That is quite common. So bursary. It is more specific. It is based on financial need. So if you're broke, or more accurately, have a gap in your finances that you can't cover or that a loan is not enough for, you can often get a bursary assessed for financial need. And that's great. You don't have to pay it back. We've got a question in the chat. Oh, okay. Using the app to record meetings with AI. That's fine. Okay, an award. Based on accomplishments, often use it as a generic term too. You'll see us refer to scholarships and awards. Basically, we mean money to pay for school. In the more specific sense, an award is really based on achievement, accomplishment. I got the top mark in my philosophy department this year, so they gave me the philosophy award, whatever. And then a grant, one-time support. It is especially not repayable. None of this stuff typically is. A loan is repayable, but a grant is very much, here's just some money, take it and go type thing. And you'll also see on the slide here, we use the phrase, the term renewable quite a bit. A renewable scholarship or award, whatever, is something that is going to continue to fund you year in, year out. So for instance, you earn a scholarship in your first year that is renewable, and you keep your grades up and they pay you again in the second year. You want to keep an eye out for renewable scholarships. It's one of the key words you're going to want to look for. All right, moving on. How you will pay for everything. We've sort of touched on this. Savings and work. If you're lucky, a lot of jobs are paying minimum wage, 15, 16 bucks an hour. If you even have the time wherewithal to commit to putting some money away and having a part-time job, not everybody's in a position where they can do that. Same story with family and parents. If your folks are in a financially secure position enough that they're socking away some money for you, and you're in a position where they like you enough to do it, then great. You know, the bank of mom and dad is tried, tested, and true. But a lot of people are not in a position to accept that kind of largesse. So, you know, we start moving on down the line here, right, to loans. And loans are, I won't say a trap, but they're trap adjacent. You want to be careful with loans because you have to pay the money back. Often, almost always with interest, which is more money than you borrowed, you pay them. So if you can avoid a loan, you should. Student loans, in Ontario, it's OSAP. In Alberta, it's Alberta Student Aid, I think. Different provinces have their own versions, and there's a federal version as well. Student loan programs in Canada are pretty generous, certainly in terms of loans. So getting a student loan is not like getting a credit card loan, if that makes sense, in terms of like risk. In any case, you have to pay loan money back. That's the risk. Will we get a question recording? Yes, recording will come, no doubt. So finally, we're at the end of the line here on this slide, scholarships and bursaries. That's what we're here to talk about, what they are, how to find them, how you can get the most out of them. Now, before we move on, most people will have a combo of all four of these, and maybe others as well that we haven't mentioned. So it's not like you can necessarily rely on any one of these four pillars. You probably want to grab as many as you can. So we think about $1,000 from a scholarship. It seems like a lot of money. It's 4 figures. But you stack that against the cost of school, which is probably $7 or $8 grand a year just in tuition minimum if you're a Canadian student in a university. If you're an international student at a Canadian university, you're looking at $25K probably a year plus living expenses. So $1,000 doesn't seem like a ton, maybe in that context, but it can often go towards some of those extra expenses like textbooks, your materials or lab fees, whatever you got going. You got to buy a block of chef's knives because you're going into culinary. Your Metro Pass, if you're attending school in person, people are doing that again. Phone bill, entertainment. They used to call OSAP the Ontario Stereo Acquisition Fund. I don't know if anyone knows what a stereo is now, but it's that little picture there. Okay, some myths. We're going to run through 5 misconceptions, sort of wrong ideas that people have about scholarships in general before we look at some fun ones. So myth 1 of 5, I don't have the marks. We of course think a scholarship is for the valedictorian, right? The brainiac at the top of the class. There is some truth to that, but it is not the whole story. In fact, quite a wide majority of the awards that we have on Scholarships Canada don't ask about your grades at all. They're interested in other things. Some of which we've hinted at already, like bursaries being based on financial need. Others we will talk about shortly. Okay. Myth 2 of 5, lots of competition. Again, this is a yes and no kind of thing. The stats here are a lot of admins want more apps, and some select few get no apps at all. So you can often win by, not often, sometimes, occasionally, win by default. Or at the very least, throw your hat into a very small ring, right? Only a few other hats in there. Basically, it's pretty much it's worth it to apply. Okay, let's keep moving. Yes, and thank you for the questions in the chat. I will sort of pick them up at the end, or at least take a break maybe a little later. Myth 3. Only schools give scholarships. Definitely not true. Think of corporations, unions, almost whomever you can imagine. They may well have a scholarship right now. And if not, ask them why. Myth 4 of 5, deadlines only in the spring. I don't know how much people think this now or not, but there is no real scholarship season. We might think of it being sort of springtime application season, that it's time to apply for scholarships. Yes, there are many awards sort of coming, but we've seen many in October as well. We're starting to see a lot more moving into the summertime, sort of May, June, July, to give students who have more free time in the summer typically time to apply without upsetting school. And then myth 5, not in financial need. Only about a third ask about that. And the real trick here is that most people are in financial need. Who has 7, 8, 10 grand just lying around ready? If you do, more power to you. Most people do not. So we just went through a handful of these myths. Most people want more apps. You don't need to be in financial need. You can't win if you don't apply. Now, there is a bit of a double-edged sword to this side because this is the same logic that the casino uses, right? You can't win if you don't play. And there is an element of risk to scholarship applications because you are putting in your time to apply upfront in the expectation or hope that it will be sort of paid off later, right? That by applying today for an hour, I will get paid in 2 weeks, 1,000 scholarship dollars, right? And that is the dream, but there's an inherent risk to that. Putting that time in doesn't necessarily get you the award the way putting an hour in at your part-time job gets you your 15 or 16 bucks for that hour, right? So just be aware of that. I don't want to downplay that scholarships are just free money and there is effort and risk involved. Okay. The sort of mantra that we have is that there is a scholarship for you. It's a bit of a tagline, but the idea is there are a lot of different separate criteria that come together to make up the different scholarships that are offered, and that it's not just for high achieving, big grades sort of students from top universities. So let's, maybe we'll take a quick second here, zoom through the chat, and if anyone has some questions, throw them into the chat, of course. We'll address them now or a little later. So recording, yes. Super hard to get a 4.0 and got no scholarships. Don't know what I'm doing wrong. Cover this later, maybe. The top grades thing should help you in most cases, at the very least, get what is called an entrance scholarship. Entrance awards are for students who are sort of straight out of high school, right into uni. Often no sort of gap year or breaks or whatever. Sometimes they permit that anyway. Entrance awards are almost always based on grades, and the higher your grades, the more they will pay you. So say you get an 85 in high school and they'll give you $1,000 a year. You get a 95 in high school, they'll give you $5,000 a year, and those are renewables. So the grades element can and sometimes does matter for sure, but yeah, often more in the sort of entrance scholarship zone, the really sort of competitive stuff where they have a lot of awards to give and they just give them out based on grades. They often won't help you so much in the more bespoke, unique stuff that we'll talk about a little later that is often related kind of to your personal circumstances. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Short answer though, Melanie, I feel your pain. Look for entrance awards if that makes sense to you. Can you win scholarships if parents have good income? Yep, often income from your parents is not a factor in scholarship eligibility. Sometimes it is, don't get me wrong. We saw financial need is the big one, right? If your parents are quite well off, and that definition depends pretty wildly on who you ask, right? So these aren't hard and fast rules, but sometimes it matters how much your parents have, often it doesn't. So yeah, hopefully that helps, Harv. How does it work for master's students? Pretty much the same. One won't get too much into it here. There are scholarships, they're just not as common, often more on the STEM side. I hope that helps. Okay, scholarships. Yeah, I'm not going to necessarily go through all of these right now. Yeah, okay, so let's keep moving for now. Keep your questions coming. We'll try to hit as many at the end. Something I've seen a couple times in the chat already, though, is scholarship for X, scholarship for Y. So we will, in that spirit, look at a small handful of awards here that are kind of interesting for one reason or another, and that may together give you a sense of the breadth, the spectrum of what could be out there. So number one here, Retail Education Scholarship Program. I love this one because high school and beyond, I worked retail, stocking shelves at the grocery store. And this award is specifically for people with that sort of background. They want retail work experience, stock a shelf, sell a shoe, whatever it is. They're looking for reference letter and an essay, 500 words, not too much, right? And we'll talk about how to make these elements, reference letter, essay, etc., easier, quicker, more painless to pull together. Doesn't care about financial need. All years of study. It's open whether you're going into your first year or you're graduating this year. That's a big factor too, because awards get harder to find the later into your education you get. This one's open to diploma or bachelor, which basically means college or university. Almost anyone is sort of eligible here. And again, no academic average. So Melanie, this is an example where your 4.0, hard-earned as it may be, isn't really a factor, right? They're looking instead more at your experience and your background. So pretty cool, something to consider. Number two, this was one from earlier this spring, open for high school students who are leaving high school, heading to uni, and have a sort of entrepreneurial bent. It's interested in financial need. So somebody asked about your parents' income, maybe Harv. This is one where it is a factor, right? Your family income needs to be 65K or less to be eligible. It's looking for grades, but only to a threshold, right? 65% is not stellar grades by any means. And again, entrepreneurial skills and community service sort of engagement, right? You're a student who is out in the world, sort of participating, as it were. 10 awards a year, I think they're 10K each, and they're renewable. This is an amazing offer. So stuff like this, it doesn't really matter your 4.0, right? Unfortunately, it's more for people who are striving to like change their world, sort of, if that makes sense. Okay, Bill 7. Now this is one I'm plugging a little bit because it is just opening again for the summer, any day now, maybe a week from now. And it's aimed specifically at LGBTQ plus students in Ontario. So a couple different caveats here. First degree, this is one where if you're going back to school, you're actually not eligible. You don't see that too often, but in this case, they're only looking for people who are doing their first diploma or degree. Must be in financial need. So they're actually going to ask you for your student loan documents, right? You applied for your student loans and how much did they assess you for? Because we want to see that you're in financial need. And then it's about $3,500. They do like 20 awards a year, and 3 or 4 of them are renewable. So this is pretty cool if you're a member sort of that community. Okay, I think this is our last example here. Number 4, the MTA. This is an example of an entrance scholarship. So Melanie, this is kind of what I was getting at here. It is, as you can see, worth 12K per year, $12,000 a year, renewable each year, plus a guaranteed internship for what, $8,000 paid or so. So you'll actually take home some coin and get all your school covered. Now, this is one of the better entrance awards out there that I'm aware of, in Canada at least. So it's a pretty big ask, right? They're looking for leadership, volunteer, community service. These are 3 keywords we're going to hammer again and again in a few minutes. They're also looking for 3 reference letters and an essay. So it's a big application package. But as I alluded, we're going to cover these things in a few minutes. And yeah, maybe that's all there is to say. There's 6 available a year from Mount Allison, so pretty neat there. Okay, where to start? Maybe now, before we start, I'll take a couple of more questions. So there are quite a few. I'm going to skip ones about specific fields, if nobody minds. Best way to find scholarships as an international student, keep looking and have great grades. International students do not have it easy. Scholarships for international schools, yep, you're in the same boat, right? You'll be an international student, but going abroad as a Canadian. And often schools will have 1 or 2 or 5 scholarships for Canadian students, but sometimes they won't. Canada's a pretty rich country. UK often is pretty Canadian friendly, so maybe that will help. Universities be in favor by choosing your top best U or M courses. They don't care, they almost never care. Where can I look for scholarships as a grade 11 student? We're going to cover that. What do you do in grade 10, 11, 12, etc. So stick around a little bit, Victoria. Grade 11 planning on, same question. How do you stay updated? We'll talk about that a little bit as well. Basically, we have a newsletter. Yep. Do exams for international students help? Not really. Should I pay to get help writing scholarships? No. Short answer, don't pay to apply for a scholarship. Let me put it that way. There are legitimate people out there who have real experience and proven track records who you can sort of hire to consult for you and help you find scholarships. I know of a handful and could name them if you want, but if you're finding an award or a service that wants you to pay to apply, that's where you should say no. So I hope that helps, Andre. Scholarships in Canada for international students for fashion and design. Oh, Angie, you're really, you're in a bad, it's not gonna be easy. Scholarships for international students, very difficult. Scholarships for art students, very difficult. That combo, not gonna be easy. I don't know anything specifically, not to say there aren't any out there, but I do wanna make it clear that you've chosen hard mode. You didn't set life to easy for yourself, I'm sorry to say. Increased chances of being awarded. We'll kind of talk about that a little bit. Short answer, apply for smaller awards, ones that you think are weird and you never heard of, or that seem like, it's only $500, it's only $750. Yeah, don't just go for big names. Show how the filter works, maybe. Find scholarships least competitive. There's a little meter. A demo of the site? Yeah, that's a good question too. I may do. Zoe, your question is quite long here. I can't quite skim it. Enroll in school full time. That's interesting. Yeah, a lot of them are for full-time students. I don't know what it's about, sort of a power play by universities to encourage full-time status, maybe, I'm not really sure. I have seen a handful of sort of part-time specific scholarships. I know RBC Future Launch has many. Not super common, I'm sorry to say. Okay, scholarships with old deadlines. Yeah, because it's very hard to keep them updated. We, do our best to hit them once a year, but it's not always possible. We offer it as a way to see what may be available. It's still on you to do some extra legwork, right? If the award's no longer there, like apologies kind of thing, but c'est la vie. We are adding new ones, trying to keep the backlog up to date, but it's not always possible. So yeah, just give it a shot. Scholarships Canada, services like it, student awards, Wyconic, whatever you're using, Scholarship. They're all tools in your tool belt, right? Nothing is going to be a 100% end-to-end solution for you necessarily. You're going to be using all these different sources and Google and your own discernment as well to piece stuff together for yourself. So yeah, the deadline's not ideal, but we're doing the best we can. Scholarship's very strict, geared towards students studying in Ontario. What about BC? Yeah, the Bill 7 one's very strict about Ontario, but that was just one example. Different awards have different requirements. Okay, so I'm going to take a little break from questions again. We're going to talk about some of the big factors here to consider when you're doing your personal inventory, starting your search for awards. This is kind of in order of importance, but maybe not really. The big one, of course, is field of study. So Angie, I mentioned earlier, your fashion design diploma degree is going to be more challenging than something like life sciences would be in most cases. There are scholarships for art students out there, but they are fewer and further between. As we see, our current culture is like STEM obsessed, so we get lots of STEM awards. If you're really trying to decide, do you pursue your love of poetry or your love of biomechanical engineering? Which is it going to be? Go biomechanical engineering. Year of study. I alluded to this being more challenging the deeper in you get. That's basically true. Entrance scholarships I defined earlier. You want to try to get them if you can. They're often renewable, continue to pay you. Activities. So I've hinted at several of these already. This is where a lot of that action is that is outside of the financial need zone and outside of the grades zone. They typically fall sort of under the activities umbrella. A lot of scholarship providers are looking for, the big three here are leadership, community involvement, and volunteer experience. Now, these are not necessarily three separate prongs in your life. They can be intertwined. They can all be of a piece. You can demonstrate leadership skills and capacities without being president of your student council. Again, it kind of goes back to that engaged student, sort of civic participant type person. You want to get caught trying, if that makes sense. Other things you might be into, different sports, maybe sports more broadly, or specific sports like ice hockey or ringette even. Religious background, your academics might fall in there as well. Certain specific extracurricular activities like being part of your school's band maybe. Academic average, that's pretty obvious. Grades are most often grade 11, grade 12. So the later years of high school are often more important, sort of grades wise. Okay, we'll look at a few more here. Heritage. This is one that we're seeing more and more of late in the sort of diversity, equity, inclusion sphere. Especially in Canada, it's often sort of Indigenous students. In the States, it's BIPOC more broadly. But basically your background could help you find certain awards. I mentioned Indigenous, certainly in the Canadian context. I've seen awards for people of Polish descent, of Chinese descent, of Norwegian, Korean, you know, what have you. So maybe your background would help. Affiliation, spend some time on this. When we're talking affiliation, we're talking you and your immediate family. So you and your mom and dad, sometimes grandma, grandpa, and reverse as well, that you're affiliated with. So companies, religious groups, unions, whatever you have. As a personal example, when I was going to college, I was working at a grocery store I mentioned. That was the No Frills, which is owned by Loblaws. They offered a scholarship to employees and sons and daughters of employees. It was also a union workplace, so the union offered scholarships. On top of that, my dad worked at Coca-Cola. They offered one, and Coca-Cola was a union workplace as well. So that was like 4 threads I could follow just based off my job and my dad's job at the time. So you want to sort of think laterally as well, not necessarily just about yourself, but about your mom and dad and maybe even grandpa sometimes. Okay, personal circumstances. This is indelible stuff about you that maybe you couldn't change even if you wanted to or wouldn't change. Stuff like, yeah, maybe you're an amputee, you've suffered a brain injury, you're a parent, the LGBTQ bit would fall under this umbrella as well, just stuff about you. Financial need, we talked about this. If you're really not sure if you're going to qualify for financial need, it's worth reaching out to the scholarship admin. We have all the contact info on the listings. The idea being that your reaching out shows that you are interested and paying attention. And we mentioned a lot of admins are looking for more applicants, right? If they come to identify your name, that may provide an edge. I'm not saying it will, and this is somewhat more common in school and program admissions than scholarship applications, admittedly. But it is true, it's called demonstrated interest, and it's a bureaucratic way of describing a student who is engaged, who's checked in. Location, just a word on this, not only where you live, where you're from, but where you're going to school. We saw with, again, the Bill 7, that was specifically for Ontario schools. Others will have other restrictions. Your town that you grew up in may offer a scholarship. I remember Chatham, Ontario used to do like $1,000 a year to some kid from Chatham who's going off to college or whatever, right? So depending where you're from, you never know. Okay, so the site does try to take some of the busy work out of this. Going through all of those factors, doing your self-inventory is important, but actually searching stuff up with those elements is challenging. The site does its best to help, with, again, the caveat I mentioned earlier that it is a tool, one of many, and its goal is to help you, basically, but it's not necessarily going to do everything for you. So you go through, set up your profile, sort of social media style. It's going to ask you a bunch of probing questions, more or less along these lines. All of these things are going to be covered in that profile setup. So it's going to give you lists and pick lists and stuff. You can choose that you're into hockey or whatever. Somebody asked about getting warned about when new stuff comes. We do offer that, the deadline alert. There's a bunch of different subscriptions you can opt into. The newsletter being one of them. I'm obligated to plug because I read it, but the deadline alert is really the action that you want to find. It is a monthly send that is going to sort of gather the awards that you match that are ending soon. So new stuff that's been added that we want to flag for you, or stuff that's closing soon, we include there. Okay, so the system spits out some matching scholarships for you. This is the basic rundown. Once you've filled out your profile, it gives you a list of awards sorted by the deadline. Now, even though you might be matched to 40 awards, you're not necessarily going to qualify for all 40. It is looking at each of these different pieces and pulling them together saying, because of X, you might like Y, or because of Z, you might like A. It's not perfect artificial intelligence by any means to, ID a cold case from a sea of possibilities based on data. Would that it were. We're kind of working on that, but that's a long-term goal. So the list is your starting point. It is a tool for you to work from. To that end, you can filter and beyond. You can cut stuff, which is to say, exit out so that you don't see it anymore. You can save stuff to your profile, all that kind of website type stuff. The filters, again, they're not perfect, but they will help you sort of sort through the sea of possibilities, start to shuffle aside some of the straw, and actually pick out, there are a couple of needles in here. It's not all haystack. So that's the basic idea. Some general tips that are not site specific. This is just general scholarship application advice. Getting motivated, putting in the time. This is the flip side of that few hours a week bit, right? The risk of applying, of spending the time. We advocate students treat their scholarship search sort of like a part-time job, or like going to the gym, or like studying for an exam, in that it is better to do these things small increments consistently rather than trying to cram the night before or get shredded because I'm going to the beach tomorrow. I can't get jacked for tomorrow, right? But I could get jacked for 2 months from now type thing. So you want to sort of be thinking ahead. You want to be doing slow little bits. You want to study for the test, not cram for the overnighter because you're out of time. That's the idea. Okay, Scholarships Canada deadline alerts, mentioned that. The requirements. Don't apply if you're not eligible. This is generally good advice. If you're pretty close and you want to try to bend the rules a little bit, some admins will think that's admirable. It's not necessarily a bad idea in all cases, but I do urge you to reach out to the award admin. Their contact info is almost always on the listing or should be nearby. Shoot them an email, give them a call. say, hey, I'm so-and-so, my life story is XYZ. Don't bore them, be polite and brief, right? But basic idea, reach out if you're not sure. Sometimes you could get a better result than if you just shrugged it off and moved on. Okay, a few more. Smaller awards, somebody asked about this. Yeah, less competition is good. Typically, the smaller, more obscure the award or the weirder the requirements, they often go unsubscribed. So I'll mention one, it's fairly popular, but it's a weird one. It's the hot tub cover guy. You tell him why you love hot tubs and he gives you $1,500 or something. So there's slightly weird stuff out there like that as well. Being prepared. So I've mentioned this a few times. There are a couple different constituent elements to a good application that you're going to want to have on hand so that when the night before the exam comes, you're ready to cram, you're ready to apply, you're not scrambling. And then don't give up. Yeah, so that's just good life advice. Being resilient is important. Bouncing back from failure, from disappointment is important. It's inevitable, it's going to happen. But the flip side too, you want to take some time to conceptualize yourself as a scholarship recipient. We often have the tendency to sort of say, it's not me, I'm not the model scholarship winner, right? It can't be me, sort of thing, for whatever reason. That sort of self-talk is not in your interest. So you want to think of yourself as someone who is worthy of taking an award home. Yeah, it's good practice. Okay, boilerplate documents. How do you get these things together in a way that's going to be relatively painless and be ready for your applications? So boilerplate means essentially a template. It is something that you can return to, that you can use again and again. So you want to create a boilerplate for each of these elements, which is resume, personal statement, and references. Now, references, generally you're going to want about 2. We saw the Horatio Alger Award wanted 3. 3 is about the max you'll ever need, at least for scholarships and school stuff. And then a resume and a personal statement. So resume should be fairly familiar to you from high school. Basically, you want to list out a 1-pager is all you need. Don't go more than that. Your education, maybe your hobbies, your work and or volunteer experience, and your contact info. Not in that order. That's basically all you need. You don't need an objective. You don't need a photo. You don't need a fancy layout or nice design. You don't need color. I've reviewed a ton of resumes. My colleagues have as well. We skim them. We do not read them closely, unless we're super interested, right? We might go back and scrutinize, but the first pass on a resume is always a quick skim, a quick scan. So you want to be punchy, you want to be brief. You want to get your point across and don't cloud it up with a bunch of other stuff. Same goes for your personal statement. You're generally going to have only about 500 words. Now that might seem a lot. It is not. 500 words is not a lot. And you're going to want to address 3 or 4 different pieces within this statement, because again, this is your boilerplate statement, right? Your standard personal statement that you're going to use for applying to a scholarship on short notice. So the things you want to include in your statement are who are you? Quick description about yourself. What are you about, right? Like your interests, your goals. What do you hope to achieve by receiving the scholarship? And what would it mean to your community for you to receive this scholarship? So you might tell it a bit about your previous experiences, what you do now, what your goals are, and how the scholarship's going to help you achieve them, and what that legacy will mean for the people around you, right? It's going to inspire my baby sister to follow my footsteps, whatever. These are the sort of basic constituents of a strong personal statement. So I will pause here to mention that customizing is important. You do want to tweak these things for particular scholarships that you apply to. If you're not talking about hot tubs to the hot tub cover guy, he's going to ignore you. So be sure that you're writing to your audience. These tips that I'm giving, just a way to make sure that you're hitting all the notes you need to in the absence of other prompts. Finally, references, I mentioned 2. You want to generally hit a sort of academic one and a personal one. When in doubt, opt for academic, not personal. Don't get your mom and dad, don't get your best friend, get somebody who knows you in a semi-pro context. Teacher's good, coach is good, supervisor at your volunteer job is good, that kind of thing. Okay, you don't need to customize those. Reference letters should be useful for any time. Okay, Scholarships Canada, I'm going to zoom through this stuff and take a few more questions. Tips and FAQs, you'll find them on there. Our social media is a good way as well to keep up to date, even though these screenshots are old. We have a sister site as well, School Finder. You may know about it. It is finding schools and programs instead of scholarships. Basically, that's the idea. Events, this is an event, but there are lots of others as well. You can find them. Okay, some FAQs. I want to address these. I've got, I think, 5 or 6 FAQs before I take some real-time questions and burn out the rest of my voice. So when should I apply? Almost always after accepting an offer of admission. Most of the time, admins want you to be at least enrolled. So generally, you need to have applied for college or university, mostly. Awards for people in the trades, yes, not as common. You want to look for tech, construction, apprenticeships, even diploma, certificate level. You got to be kind of careful about what you're looking for. They do exist, but the incentive structure for tradespeople is very different from other degree types, so the scholarships are just not there yet. We are seeing new programs coming in, though, that are aiming to shake up that space. So this slide may be different next year. How many awards can I apply to? Basically as many as you want. I'll leave it at that. Highest value awards, a couple there are some of the biggest I'm aware of in Canada, Loran, TD, Schulich especially. These are the cream of the crop, the big names, the I cured cancer on the long weekend sort of people. Maybe you're one of them. If so, I hope so. Can I defer a scholarship? Sometimes, yes. It always comes down to when in doubt, reach out. Scholarships for international students, yes. Not as common, often competitive and often more focused on grades than the volunteer leadership community service type stuff. And then vice versa if you're leaving Canada to go elsewhere. So next steps, somebody asked, I'm in grade 11, what do I do? You're in a pretty good spot right now to be building that resume. Again, that means your volunteer, your leadership, your community service. Importantly, volunteering is not about the number of hours. Nobody cares how many hours, frankly. If it's 100, if it's 200, doesn't matter. What matters is how much the volunteer experience has changed you and how much you've impacted the people you've been volunteering with. So don't tell us you spent 40 hours, helping Mrs. Wilson at the retirement home. Tell us how Mrs. Wilson taught you about, carrying on when times are tough or something, right? I hope that's clear. Grade 12, now you're applying for school and awards in that order. You're looking for entrance awards, awards for first years, renewable scholarships. You can sometimes use scholarship offerings to help you find a school, see who's going to offer you what, right? Maybe you want to go to Mount Allison because you want that $12K a year plus the paid internship, and maybe you wouldn't consider them otherwise. That's fine. Okay, if you're in college and uni, clubs, associations, financial aid office, and your department. If you're in the English department, they probably have scholarships for strong English students. Okay. Pop quiz. This is where I normally do the t-shirt cannon. We are virtual. I have no t-shirts except in my wardrobe, and I can't cannon them at you. So we're going to skip the pop quiz. I'll thank you here. I'm going to take some questions for the next 10, 12. I'll try to take as many as I can. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us, folks, and have a nice evening. So, okay, let me start here. Lisa, Optus Awards. Can I bend the age rule if I have a disability? That's a great example of an award where bending the rule is almost encouraged. I know the admin there, Janet, is very much looking for sort of outside the box type people. So bending the rule, that's no problem. Scholarships before you receive an offer. Yeah, it's tough. It depends on the school. Be able to share the recording? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so Andre, it really depends on the school. Schools are trying to encourage people to apply for the program even before they know if they're going to get any financial aid. It's almost like a trick kind of thing. Okay. Can you fake a person in nursing or disability and search for this person? Oh, do it live. Yeah, good question. Maybe next time we can do a demo. The site is tricky to use. Glitches do happen. It's old architecture. Messing around with it for an hour or two is going to be more needed than 5 or 6 minutes. There's some back and forth that's required. There's no way around it, unfortunately. Okay, possibilities to apply in grade 11. There are some awards are interested in age groups specifically. So it might say it's for 16 to 25. Those Opterus we just talked about is an example of that. If you're 16 in grade 11, then go ahead and apply. That's great. A lot of times awards are not age-based, but some of them are. So that's fine. Okay, let's see. Stevania, thank you for answering Zoe's question. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, thanks. Okay. Suggestions for mature and physically disabled students. I don't have any offhand, but I do know there is an organization called NEADS, NEADS. It is an acronym. Disability is the D for sure. Can't remember really the rest. National. NEADS, anyway, they are a scholarship program or a group of scholarships for folks living with disability. So I would advocate that. Okay, Zoe, yeah. So this is a question we do get. If you get a scholarship from a uni or a college, do you have to be attending that school? For sure. Yeah, George Brown College is not going to give you a scholarship so that you can then go attend Humber, unfortunately. The only caveat there is if you are doing a sort of exchange program or a co-degree type thing, but those are rare and you'll know it when you see it. Okay. Yes, the filters are not good. I totally hear you, Sophia, and agree. The tech is behind the ambition. And comments like these are helpful to get the team to sort of address these. Okay, how does religion help? It's just one more factor. Some awards are interested in people who are into like ministry activities. There is a whole scholarship program called MAX that is for students of Muslim heritage. So, if you're not a member of Islam, then you can't apply type thing. So it's just one of many things to consider alongside I skateboard and I go to mass or whatever, right? Scholarships for sports that make it so you don't need to play for the school. Yeah, sometimes for sure. The sort of come to us to play on our football team and we will give you a scholarship thing is more of a United States type deal. Here in Canada, sports scholarships are more just for students who play the sport, right? So I saw a softball one today that was like, people who play softball, right? You don't necessarily need to be on the uni softball team. I hope that helps. Scholarships going into third year. Yep, but they're tough to find. Okay. Great. So a few other questions. Scholarships for autistic students. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I haven't seen specifically or nothing jumps to mind, but you certainly might find it. Psychology. Yeah, the GrantMe. Yeah, so GrantMe I've heard about. It seems the consensus is they're pretty aggressive, kind of pushy, and they are trying to get you to spend money up front to apply. My sense is I would stay away from that. Again, I mentioned there are qualified scholarship consultant type people, but they're not going to charge you $1,000 and they're not going to push you. Would it be hard for an international student to get a scholarship in veterinary medicine? I don't know how difficult specifically for vets. I know there are not very many vet programs, at least in Ontario. I don't think in Canada, really. So what they have to offer, you could find out pretty quickly because there's only a few of them. How challenging, I'm not totally sure, really. Terrible stories about GrantMe. Yeah, sorry. 14 in Asia. Can I find scholarships for you to study abroad? Yeah, 14 if you're still on the line. Pretty much too young. You want to really be searching for, not even searching necessarily. You want to sort of be building up your credibility, your resume. Yeah, if you're 14, you're still pretty young. College is like 3-4 years away. So I'd be saving money and studying hard if I was you. Okay. Harder going into the arts? Yes. Short answer, yes. Scholarships for going into business? Yes, they're not so common. How should I go about it as an international student? Are there courses that have higher chances? Yeah, basically like STEM stuff, computer science are often more likely to offer scholarships to international students. For international students, and by that I mean coming into Canada specifically, the emphasis is often on grades. They really are looking for those like 94, 95% average type people. Because there are so few international awards available, they can afford to be quite stingy, I guess, if that makes sense. They can really hold out until they've got somebody who hits all the boxes. Okay, I'm going to U Calgary. Have all their scholarships or go to their website? Yeah, good question. So, especially for universities, always the best spot is going to be their website. If you're trying to just get a sense of what you have in general, you'll find some U Calgary stuff on Scholarships Canada without a doubt. But if you know you want to go to U Calgary, go directly to them for sure. I don't know what their actual search page is like, but they're usually pretty good on university sites. They only have their own material, so there's less to wade through. Yeah, so hopefully that is helpful. Find a recording. Yeah, we're going to email it to anyone who registered, so no worries there. And we'll put it on our YouTube. Scholarships for students who haven't graduated high school or haven't been accepted into a post-secondary institution yet. Not too much in the way of haven't. Yeah, so short answer, not really. The caveat being, of course, that there are some awards that are sort of age gated, meaning they're open to 16 to 25 or something, and you're in high school at 16, so fine, you can apply. Most of the time, though, I want to say 80% plus, assume you are graduating high school and are entering college or university. So bear that in mind. Scholarships for certs like PMP and CISP. I don't totally know what either of them are, but certificates in general are often not funded super well. The sort of 1 year certificate, capital C, generally is not going to be funded to the same degree as a diploma or degree type thing. Just the luck of the draw, I guess. So yeah, sorry about that. Scholarships for IB students. I haven't seen too much of that, and we do get this question a lot, but it's just not something that comes up too often. Usually when I do see it mentioned, it is in the context of you have IB or a regular diploma or whatever else, right? It's just one option. So awards specifically for folks with the IB, I don't know. I would try their own website if there is like the International Baccalaureate Society, Association, whatever it is. They themselves might offer scholarships. Like I'd look into that, to be honest, if I was you, but I don't know offhand. Scholarships for medicine. Central American want to study ophthalmology. Yeah, so I mostly know about sort of Canadian medical schools and Caribbean medical schools, because those are the sort of two zones that Canadians go. Canada has like 2,500 seats, and so those get filled, and then everyone else goes to the Caribbean. In my experience, it's the Caribbean schools that actually offer more scholarships often. Canadian schools will, but they are so oversubscribed that it's very difficult to get them. You're coming from Central America. I don't know how that would play into it for you, but I would be looking, I think, at Caribbean schools rather than Canada, because it's at least going to be less expensive. Scholarships in animal science. Yep, again, don't know offhand, but I've certainly seen that. Canadians get US Canadian scholarships to study in the US. Yes, for sure. Canadians going to the US and vice versa is one of the better quote unquote options scholarship wise. Some states have full on tuition swap agreements. Some schools have that kind of thing. You probably want to check out educationusa.com. And then you also want to check out the website fastweb.com, Fastweb. That is sort of like a Scholarships Canada type thing, but specifically for the US. So try those two. I've just put them in the chat. Hopefully that helps. Okay. Many scholarships for aspiring surgeons or nurses. Yeah, I haven't seen actually too much of that either. We'll sometimes see like healthcare rolled into STEM, but the support for surgeons and nurses and sort of high level healthcare, medical care stuff, we actually don't see too often. That's a case where I'd be looking at the school or schools you're interested in and check their website, reach out to them directly, see what they have on offer, because often they will make like adjustments to the tuition at the source. They won't advertise it as a scholarship, but they'll like make it cheaper for you later on down the line. So hopefully that helps. Master in cybersecurity, yeah, for sure. Cybersecurity is something that we're seeing grow. You just missed one a week or so ago. It was for women in Masters of Cybersecurity, specifically from an antivirus software company. So they're out there for sure. ECE students, yeah, I have seen that. A little bit less common, I think, than STEM stuff. Scholarships for being a coach, haven't actually seen that. I feel like I've seen like umpire and referee type stuff. I'm not too sure about a coach. You would want to be looking in general for like sports, recreation, leisure, fitness. You want to use these multiple sort of keyword approach, right? Don't just search exactly what you're looking for, search for stuff that is sort of around that as well. Hopefully that helps. Oh, okay, and Heather's got some recommendations there as well. Better Jobs Ontario apprenticeship options. Cool, appreciate that. Receive scholarships during uni. Yep, for sure. They're just more challenging to find the later in you get. A consultant with a good scholarship track record. Yes, so there are two names that jump to mind in no particular order. They are Janet McDonald at My Campus GPS and Brittany Palmer at Unlock Your Future. It's either .com or .ca, I'm not really sure. Either of them are totally legit. I would vouch for them. I know them both. I know Janet quite well. Yeah, you could trust them. I don't know what their rates are, to be honest, but they're not going to be $1,000, and it's not going. You'll get some actual help. So you can reach them on social media or whatever. And the websites for US scholarships. Yes, I did put that in the chat, but they move fast and I didn't contextualize it. So USA, voila. Yeah, so FastWeb and Education USA. Credit Canada Inc. Yeah, that's a good one, actually. Thanks for that on the disability bit. Judy, you're awesome. Okay, so we're just about at time. If folks have a couple of more questions, that's great. Otherwise, I'm happy to happy to call it here. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate all the questions, the engagement. I like to bounce off the audience, so thank you for that. We'll share the recording and so on. Best of luck out there. Thanks, everybody.